We're back with live streams after how many months? I don't even know. I think 5 months of something of no live streams. Maybe I'm ready to do some again. So for this one, it's Freeform Chat. So I'll just reply to whatever catches my eye in the chat, and we'll do that for about an hour. I have three topics I want to start off with. So the first one is, these are three questions that people kind of gave me beforehand. So the first question is about Sanjivani Vidya, which means the power of resurrection, and Venus, the planet Venus. So in Vedic mythology, the character, the god for Venus is Shukra. Shukra is somebody who has this power of Sanjivani. Jiva means to live, and Sanjivani means to give life. Sanjivani Vidya means like a medicine or a science. It's actually a type of surgery which will restore the body to be able to support the consciousness of the life form. So the question is it's just an open question, like, can you talk about this? But, why is this power associated with Venus? And also, where does this power come from? Well, just a quick bit about where the power comes from. That story is told in Mahabharata. This power actually comes from Shiva. You can see Shiva using this power in the Bhagavatam's 4th canto, which I have translated. So if you go victicare.com and look to the books, and then you get the 4th canto, you'll hear the story of how Shiva has this power of resurrection. He killed Daksha, his father-in-law, and then he was convinced to forgive him after he had killed him. So he then resurrected him. So that's one example of where Sanjivani Vidya comes from. Shukracharya was taught Sanjivani Vidya by Shiva. And, there's many fascinating stories. Somebody else named Kutch learned it from him. Some fascinating stories about that. It involves Devyani, his daughter, etc., 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 etc. But suffice to say, for the purposes of astrology, it's kind of important to know that Venus is associated with this power of resurrecting something. So in general, Venus has the ability to revive people, bring them back out of depression, bring them back from a death-like catatonic state. So that just makes sense, because Venus symbolizes the things in life that are worth living for, the reason for living. Darwin has a theory of survival of the strongest, but it's not really entirely accurate to say survival of the strongest. It's really survival of the happiest. Life doesn't really, and it's also not that survival is the target of life. Happiness is the target of life. And if the things that Venus represents are not available to a person, they won't try to survive. So, let's just make sure I'm still alive on this chat, so Venus doesn't have to resurrect my live stream. So that makes sense, right? Everything Venus represents, which is happiness, really, is what revives us. The other thing I just wanted to mention about with this topic is it's not really Vedic, it's not limited to the Vedic astrology that we associate this power of resurrection with Venus. It's in all forms of astrology. In fact, if you look at the symbol for Venus, you would get low marks in my school if you didn't realize that is the Ankh of Egypt. And the Ankh of Egypt is the symbol of resurrection and immortality. So it's a little bit of an interesting question to ask. Why does the planet Venus have the association of resurrection? The reason is that this planet repeatedly dies. It dies on a cycle. If you just observe it in the sky, you'll see that it's alive. It has a life cycle. It comes to life. It comes into the sky. It comes out to become very bright. And then it starts to wane and go back kind of towards the edge of the sky. And then it disappears. It dies. And then you suddenly see it a little bit later in a different world. You see it in the morning instead of at night, where it does the same pattern. So because of Venus's proximity to the sun, what this planet does is it comes out of combustion, and it comes out to about 60 degrees distance, and then it goes back into combustion. And that makes it come into the two different worlds. The night world is the evening star, and then the morning star. So this visual fact of Venus conveys the sense of repeatedly dying but being reborn. And hence, in all the different cultures, Venus is associated with resurrection. So that was one of the things that people had given me this question prior to even starting the stream. Another one was, how important is Garbhadan Samskar Muhurta? So for those of you who are not familiar with these kind of words, that means electing an auspicious time for conception of a child. So this is a traditional part of Vedic culture, is to conceive a child at a naturally auspicious time. So my answer is, I would answer this from two angles. One, if you consider it important at all to try to time your efforts, then the timing of conception, you should consider it to be extremely important, because a child is not a camera. A child is a very significant addition to your life, which has huge impacts upon your life. So you would want to, plan and prepare it as much as possible. So if you are of the mind that it is important to use electional astrology and rituals that are available to you to purify a certain thing, if you're of the mind that that is important, then this event must be extremely important, at least the conception event of a child. Now you might think, what does the conception event have to do with anything? But according to ancient magics and sciences and ways of thinking of things, the conception event tremendously impacts the thing which is conceived at that time. So yeah, you would want to do it. And then part two of that question is, well, what are the factors involved? The factors are very similar to any other familial type of election. So, you want to avoid the harsh nakshatras, the ugras. You might even want to evolve the strong ones, and you want to go for druvas and mridus and sweet ones, soft ones. And you want to, it's the same kind of electional criteria that you use for any other type of thing like marriage or romance or anything like that. But the other way that I wanted to answer this question is, on the other hand, due to the conditions that we live in today, actually speaking, those sorts of trying to achieve results by technique and mystical technology are severely impaired by the circumstances that we live in today. So in other words, magic doesn't work, or doesn't work very well anymore. So another way of looking at it is, it's not really efficient to focus too much on ritualistic aspects of trying to have an auspicious conception, and rather one should focus on the more essentials, like the actual feelings of the woman and the man, the actual happiness of the two during the conception, etc. Rather than, because in the old days, the technical aspects of ritual were very impactful because there wasn't detriments from the environment and society. But these days, there's so much interference from the rest of the other kind of technology that we use, and the just the way that we live, that even when you try to follow the rituals correctly, they don't really work in and of themselves. So those are the two ways I want to answer that. Third question was, somebody's asking me, hey, I decided to get married, so once upon a time you told me that my spouse would be taller than me, or taller. And so, I'm thinking of putting on, this is an Indian way of going about finding a marriage partner. It's a little bit foreign to others. But, I'm thinking of putting 5'5" as a criteria, as a minimum height for the, prospects. My reply to that I want to share with everybody. It's not that you shouldn't use astrology for these things, but you should know astrology well enough to know how interpretive criteria work. You have to know enough practically about how astrology practically works to realize that the number of variables involved in it are even more significant than predicting the weather. So even if a reading comes across from a particular situation in charts that says taller, your bride will be taller, your wife will be taller, if you deduce that interpretation to 5'5" and leave it at that, you've really shortchanged yourself actually on the value of that interpretation. Because there's so many other variables that might be involved. It might not literally be physical height. It might be posture. It might be education. It might just be that you feel kind of small in the presence of this person. You feel smaller. So I encourage people like this. It's not that that you believe in astrology more, the more literally you take everything. And that you're a better, follower of astrology, the more literally you take every interpretation. That's not the case. The better thing to do is to be educated about how prediction works. And just like weather prediction, you get basic ideas very accurately, but the very specifics, like for example, they can predict when the rainy season is going to end, but they're also trying to tell me how much it's going to rain on every day, and they constantly get that wrong. But they get these general trends of, it's going to basically end in a week, accurate, because of the number of variables involved that we can't deduce, we can't keep track of. So if you aren't aware of that, you actually will be a better follower and an appreciator of astrology if you don't be so boxy and literal about the interpretations. Okay, folks, so those were the 3 topics and questions. Thank you, Heidi. That were outstanding. Now I'm going to look at the chapter. What do they call it? The chat. So Juan is asking if I'm going to do level 2 and 3 again. I'm not planning it, but after things settle down, maybe I will. Alf is asking if Venus is usually prominent in a Bhaktis chart. In a real Bhaktis chart. Yeah. But there's other ways to be a bhakta, that somebody might recognize you as a bhakta. Bhakta means like a devotee. So it can also just come from renunciation, but to actually truly love, you need to have a prominent Venus and moon. So yes, Holly, you can fit it, and I'll try to see if I can see it. SM, can I talk about Kalpurusha horoscope? No, sorry, I don't know. The only thing I know about Kalpurusha is my knowledge of Kalpurusha is limited to the idea that Pisces is the feet and Aries is the head and everything else in between is in between. So there must be something else that you're talking about, which I'm not educated on. So I'll pass on responding to that. What else do we have? What is the most common finding you have had when it comes to predicting career? I'm not sure. how to reply to that, but I feel that this artist yoga, which I've identified, is very, very, very solid. So you might already know what I'm talking about if you have a habit of watching my videos, especially if you're watching the ones where I look at the example charts. Like, for example, Jupiter in Aries in the 10th house with Salvador Dali, or Jupiter in Taurus in the 10th house with Picasso, etc. You're always going to hear about this artist yoga, although I might not always name it the artist yoga. It's the people with the artistic career. Like, the meaning of that will be that they're so good at art that they can make a living from it. They all, oh God, I can almost say always, have the 11th, 3rd, and 5th lords very, very prominently interacting with each other. That's one thing. Another thing is the principle of authors. I usually find that the 10th house gets connected with the 3rd house. So as far as my memory goes, usually the way it works is 10th lord goes to the 3rd house. It leads to people being good at writing quite a lot and maybe having that as a career. Other principles of career is that it's not really limited to the 10th house. It's generally a person's career winds up to be the thing that they're most talented at. So if you just limit to the 10th house, you're kind of limiting your ability to assess that. So often the career will definitely have to do with their most prominent planet. But because the 10th house is very prominent, often the most prominent planet is also in the 10th house. Anything else about career? That's about it. I think also that for that one, watching those videos with the examples, most of those people are known for their career. So you can see how we deduce their career from those examples. Holly wants to know what Venus and Mars in the 7th house are like. It's too much. And Scorpio in the 7th house. It's too much to really say. But I would caution you to even ask that question to me in this format right now, because what if I say something weird, or how prepared am I to respond to that right now? And this is kind of an important question to you, I think. So I would refrain from answering, except to say that it's kind of spicy, saucy, hot, and that the rest of the stuff you need to look at the other factors. Pratik says, have I made any videos on Sadesati? Sadesati, maybe I did this a long, long time ago because it's just a joke. Sadesati is just kind of one of those fads that caught on and don't put importance in it. What the classics put importance on by transits is mostly Bamsa Trikona, which means geometric transits by angle, by degree. What's the entrepreneur yoga Alf asks? Oh, this is one more thing about career. People have two concerns going on with their career. One is what is it, and one is how good is it. So again, you might not really just limit yourself to the 10th house to figure out the how good is it part either. And of extreme importance to understanding how successful the person's career is the Raja Yogas that they have. Okay, so Raja Yoga is super important for career. Of entrepreneur yoga, I think you want to see lots and lots of Mars and lots of 3rd. Probably joining in with the 11th or something. Anupam asks, if astrology is nothing but reading information written in the stars, then are we humans nothing but living our destinies? What's the connection? I don't see the connection between the 2 points. So to answer your question, human beings have, compared to the other life forms, human beings have very big ability to make choices. This is relative to other life forms, and it's not unlimited ability to make choices, because you make choices based on habits and you make choices based on previous momentum of things. But compared to other life forms, human beings have a lot of ability to decide what they're going to do about their situation. And then what is astrology about? Astrology is describing the influence on your decision making, the factors that are influencing you. You have to understand that. And if you don't understand that, I have videos on what is fate, what is destiny, what is karma. Look them up for my channel, please. So, or the book, Beautifully Rational Philosophy of Astrology. VictorCara.com, go to books and look for that one. The Beautifully Rational Philosophy of Astrology explains this in detail. Why do I feel like Donald Trump right now? Yeah, I think because I'm talking about myself. So you generate your destiny. You generate your destiny, and so you're continually generating destiny. And what the astrology is describing are the factors that are influencing your current generation of destiny due to the previous choices that you made. Simple as that. Chima, I didn't see it. Oh, Jonathan. My question is, what would be the number one rookie mistake for beginning astrologers? That one is clear. I did this in the recent video on predicting death prediction. When will I die is the thumbnail, and it's death predictions using Bruce Lee's chart. It's kind of a black thumbnail with red letters. And that one, I talk about the number one rookie mistake, which is to assume that the operators between statements in classical formulas are or operators. So for example, if I say, you're going to die if Saturn transits your 8th lord or Jupiter transits your 8th lord. That word or is the biggest mistake that rookies make. It's not the word or, it's the word and. It's a huge difference, and it opens the door to actually doing astrology effectively when you realize that interpretation from a chart depends upon the word and, A-N-D, which means how things are linking up. It's not just about astrology, it's about everything else too. It's the way anything happens. It's not just that one thing causes something else. It's several things lending their momentum in the same direction that generate anything. And so astrology is just like that. Number 2 and 3, the number 2 and 3 mistakes. Number 2 mistake is probably to think that modern astrology is better than classical astrology. And the number 3 mistake is probably to think that it's kind of related, but that the more you know, the more you learn, the better you will be at astrology. It's completely not true. It's the more you practice, the more you practice one thing over and over, the better you get at it. And so people generally, they try to devour as much astrological information as they can when they want to get into astrology. But it's very ineffective for a beginner to do that. The better thing is to just sit with one concept until it actually works, and have a high standard for what actually works, until you really understand how it works and why it works, and make it work. What is Jupiter like? So in other words, sticking with the basics, especially what do the various players in astrology represent? That's why I don't really care too much about doing level 2 and level 3, which was a previous question. Am I going to do level 2 and 3 classes again? That's what this YouTube channel is really doing. Level 2 was like all these videos that I'm doing, Jupiter in the 10th house in Taurus, etc. Level 3 is going to be Paladeepika when we get to it later on. So it's going to happen here on YouTube. But another thing about that is it's not really important to do level 2 and 3, because you can't even get that right unless you do level 1 really well. And level 1 is just to clearly understand what are these fundamental players represent, and what are they? What is the zodiac? Half of us don't know that, or are wrong about it. What is a nakshatra? What is a planet? What is a house? People don't even know those things, yet they're sitting there trying to use them. What is it? What do these things actually really represent? Clearly understanding it, that's the... Skipping that step is the number 3. Thank you, somebody. Thank you, Kuma. Kuma says, hey, I have Uranus at 0. You got to be careful with the pronunciation. And Neptune at 24 in my first house, Capricorn. How would I support balancing these energies? Look for something else besides Uranus and Neptune. Because those are not classical astrological planets. So, you know, if you want, since you were kind enough, maybe tell me more about your chart. Because I wouldn't recommend dealing with trying to interpret things that aren't really part of classical astrology. A young woman named Hope says, asked if I'm Hindu. Yeah, actually, I do answer it affirmatively. In your view, is it logically sound to follow astrology but not ascribe to Hinduism entirely? Sure. Why not? Why would you have to ascribe to Hinduism? Look at all those astrological cultures like Egypt and Babylon. But they all share, they might not share the same name of Hinduism, but they all share common concepts, like about what destiny is, what fate is, and how incarnation, what the world is, how incarnation and reincarnation works. Angel, good to see you here. If you could talk to an avatar of one of the planets in astrology, which one would you choose and why? I think any of them would be fine, but I kind of like Parshuram. I would kind of want to talk to Parshuram, but I don't know. I don't have it high on my list. Can Mercury and Mars and Pisces help with writing? Omar, yes. Possibly, but it has to do with how they line up with houses. So without considering houses, you can't really make money statements. What else do we have here? I'm popping down a little bit. Stupid and philosophical question from Pratik, according to Pratik. Because I keep fighting a lot of things in my head, since I am very logical and scientific, isn't reading astrology giving a confirmation bias? No. No, not necessarily. Confirmation bias is a different story. It may be there, may not be there. I would encourage you to watch my videos on astrology and science. I think the playlist is right there on my channel page. Necro says, can Nakshatra Tarabala be effectively used in synastry for all planets? I don't know. It would be good to try it. I think so. I would want to test that, but that is one of the tantalizing potentials that it does offer. I do have videos on Tarabala, and I also have a report on Tarabala. If you want to follow up on that, you could also do that through my channel page, I think. SM says, in Paladeepika chapter 10 on 7th house, you discussed 2 and 7 under malefic influence for men, 7 and 8 for women. I can't remember this in that much detail. 2nd is 8th from the 7th. So it's affliction to the longevity of the spouse. Makes sense, but why is this different for women? I can't really remember what I was saying there, SM. Let's see if I can remember. I can't remember, but I think if you watch that video, I had talked about it in that video. So I apologize for that. Chris is asking, why use Galactic Center Sagittarius 0? I don't. Holly. Highly yes if I do personalized readings. I stopped doing that a couple of years ago. But the reports that I do are personally, like, I wrote all the code and all the text. It's not necessarily that something is a great or a not great placement. It's just that you want to align the way that you live with the placements that you have. So for example, let's say if I have a placement that is great. Let's keep the analogy super simple, and then you can make it specific in your own mind. Okay, so let's say I have a chart that says I'm really good at baking cookies. Then is that particularly good or is it particularly bad? It's not particularly good or bad. Or let's say I have a chart that says I'm really bad at eating ice cream. It makes me very sick. Is that good or bad? It's not good or bad. The question of good or bad comes in is whether or not how I deal with that makes it good or bad. So if I have a chart that says that I'm really good at baking cookies, but instead I'm trying to make arrows for a living, or be a computer programmer for a living, then that's bad. Then it's bad for me that I have placements that say I'm good at making cookies because what I wanted to do was be a computer programmer. But the solution to that is to bake cookies. So the proactive way of dealing with astrological conditions is to align yourself to them. And this is why it's also spiritually advantageous to practice astrology, because it gives you the samskara, or the experience of aligning yourself to the supreme will, the superior will, instead of acting independently from the supreme will, which is the fundamental step to take to get on track towards enlightenment and liberation. So doing things like aligning your objectives with the objectives of your karmas are very good for you, not just materially, but also spiritually. So whether or not Mars and Venus and Scorpio in the 7th house, whether or not you even have it, I don't know, because I haven't calculated your chart. But whether or not it's good or bad is also not really a question to answer in isolation from the question of what about you as a person? What do you want to do? What are you trying to do? What do you want to achieve? So your responsibility is to make it good. Let's see what else we got. Croy Sus says, a lot of the remedy in Vedic astrology is to relocate from the place of birth. Oh, really? I never really noticed that. How and why does this work as a remedy? I don't really know. I don't really notice that. But the part that does kind of ring a bell for me, what you're saying is one way to read a chart simply is to find out what direction is good for a person. Because it's very simple, because literally the chart is arranged by directions. North, south, east, west are literally the houses. So you can assess that the inauspiciousness in this chart is located in south, southwest, and the auspiciousness in this chart is in the northwest and in the east. So the more that you move towards the east and do things towards the east, the better it is for that particular person. That's the only thing that rings a bell for me. How do I think these cultures all reach similar philosophies and beliefs? Two things. One is that they're all humans. And two is that the world was always global. It just took much longer in the old days for the global information to spread around. So the meaning of that is, if people in Babylonia are working on math, it's going to affect what people in South Africa or in India are learning and doing with math, because there's traders going back and forth, and there's also delegations, political and intellectual, going back and forth, no matter how far back you go in human history. If there's somebody in India that's working on meditation techniques, that's definitely going to find its way up to Sweden, because the world was never isolated. Human beings always communicated with each other. And it's not just evident in cultural and religious beliefs. It's all the languages are really just different pronunciation systems on one language or one or two languages. What else we got? Dr. Gaurav Singhal. Okay, nice to see these names again. Can a planet in the sixth house give wealth and smadash? Well, I think you should learn astrology basically to know that it all depends on what planet it is, what it's the lord of, what effect, what's going on with it. You can't blanketly say no. It's dark. What is it called? Black swan. You're doing the black swan thing if you say no. But generally, the planet in the sixth house isn't so great. But under circumstances, it can be fantastic. There's one example chart. I can't remember whose it was. Maybe Diana Ross's or somebody. But in this new series of Jupiter in the 10th house, one of the important charts in one of those videos says a 6th and 8th house exchange. You think this person is not going to get good results from their 6th lord? Because it's Viparit Raj Yoga. Or it's a Maha Parivartana. Okay? Take your time. Take your time and learn it. It is worth learning. I think that's one of the reasons why people don't take their time with astrology, is that they don't realize that it's actually worth learning. It's not a joke. Got somebody else here. Hey, Inima. Yeah, thank you so much. It has been a while. I'm doing okay. I've kind of turned into like a gardener and a construction worker since the last time you saw me. So I was actually all kind of full of sweat before this happened because of doing so much work outside. And so I haven't really been able to keep up with YouTube as much, but I'm transitioning back into that. What else do we have? Quick surf, internet. How can we define truth? I think you're best to try to be simple about it. So I think also you want to decide whether you're talking about a true statement or truth as some kind of a concept. So those are two different definitions. The word true, using to mean a true statement, means a statement that accurately reflects reality. The word truth means reality. So how do we define reality? Actually, if you go to my site, victorguerra.com, go to the classes section, enroll in the class called What is Reality? Or the Vedic definition of reality. It goes to great lengths to define reality. So reality is a perception from consciousness. So consciousness is the basic foundation of reality. And the perceptions are variable. But the thing about reality that's not variable is the conscious perceiver. So that's the ultimate way to define truth. It's a perception. And generally, the what do you call it? The conventional way of defining it is a perception that a lot of people agree on as being accurate. That's a relative truth. And there are mostly only relative truths, but there are some absolute truths, like the perception of existence and the perception of being, the perception of consciousness itself. Alf says Krishna's chart is an example of a great sixth house. That is true. Inim is joking that I'm a New York plumber. I was thinking of becoming Mario from Nintendo. Can Mars and Scorpio squaring the ascendant in Leo affect confidence and authority? Can Mars and Scorpio squaring the ascendant in Leo? So let's think that out. Can it undermine confidence and authority? Maybe. You could be onto something there. Also, check what's going on with Jupiter. check what's going on with Rahu, check what's going on with the ninth house to really confirm how the native is dealing with authority. Maybe particularly if it's doing something where Magha is located. Like Magha, I believe now is towards the end of Leo, so then you would see a more pronounced effect on authority and relationship with authority. As I said, Jonathan asked, what's the number 1, 2, and 3 mistakes of beginners? One of them is to use the or statement. So this could be an example of an or statement. It's where you does Mars squaring the ascendant in Leo from Scorpio to X. Yes, it does, but don't treat it as an or statement. Everything in astrology is an end statement. So how does it go with the other things is always essential. The thing that you see from Mars and Scorpio affecting the ascendant is that the person will have an inclination to be independent. So generally authorities don't like us to be independent. So it does set the stage for there to be conflicts with authority if Mars is influencing the ascendant. But to get confident that that's what's actually happening, or that that's the way that this actually gets experienced by the native primarily, you would need to see some some confluence from other effects. So I would suggest seeing what's affecting Jupiter. Because Jupiter also describes how much we trust people. See what's happening with the ninth house, because that also describes his authority. See what's happening with the sun. Jennifer, I thought he used equal houses. He is me? No, I don't use equal houses. It's whole sign. The difference between equal and whole sign. I have a video called The House Systems. I bet you if you Google Victor Kara house systems, you'll find it. Kuma again asks. Kuma is Japanese for bear. Is there a way to find purpose in this lifetime through your chart? Certainly, I would think so. I think that's the whole point, really. You look at this chart, and this is the communication from the universe, from God, from the gods, about what you should be doing and when you should be doing it. And then your purpose becomes to align with that and to do it well. Casper asks, during the death process, is smell the first sense to go and sound the last? I don't know. But let's try to make sense of it. It should be smell first. It should be theoretically smell first. And sound should theoretically be the last. Because the evolution is in the opposite order. The evolute of the sensory perceptions is in the opposite order. It goes from sound to sight to taste, sound to sight to tactility to taste to smell. So when losing consciousness, it should go in the reverse order. And I have not heard that definitively described for death or for fainting or anything, but I have heard it described for liberation. So liberation is a type of death, and death is a type of liberation. So we can extrapolate that it's yes. Chinmay says, trying to do karma yoga, doing service at the temple, chanting japa whenever I can, but maintaining. Why do you guys are so open? But maintaining celibacy is difficult for me. Any advice? Don't worry about it. Focus on what you can do. And why do you need to do celibacy? Are you a yogi? You're a karma yogi, right? You're not a jnana yogi. Jnana yogis do celibacy. Karma yogis, they don't do celibacy because they can't. You can only do things that you can do. And you do things that you... what determines what you can do is what you understand and what you have experienced. You cannot do things that you don't really have capacity to do. You can only imitate them for a while. So I think what you're trying to do is imitate aspects of Jnana Yoga while doing Karma Yoga, which is not terribly bad, but you should realize that it's not your adhikar. It's not your level. Do what you can do. And do it well. That gives you the good effects. Der Wolf, I also like to see that name again. Der Wolf says, I think I lost what Der Wolf said, but I wanted to look at it. I wonder on Nakshatra Padas a lot. Dharmaksh Kama Moksha. How do we apply to the Nakshatra deity? Some will clash according to Nakshatra nature as shown in your video. Oh, Der Wolf, I wish that you knew me better. But I can't fault you because I'm just one living entity out of billions. But if you did know me better, you would know my stance on Nakshatra Padas. In fact, I think I recently did 6 biggest mistakes about benefics and malefics. So I think maybe once a month I'm going to do another biggest mistakes kind of video. I think the next one might be Zodiac. Another one would be Nakshatras. So one of the biggest mistakes about Nakshatras is this whole infatuation with Padas. And the whole thing of Padas actually only arose after the siderealization of the Zodiac. Now you may say, hey, that was a really long time ago. Yeah, but it's not intrinsic to the concepts. It's a imposition upon the concepts. Now, 2,000 years later, it feels like it's a long-standing one, but it's still an imposition. It's only because when you when you force the nakshatras to, actually, it's when they force the zodiac to align to the nakshatras, then you get 4 navamshas per nakshatra, and that gives, since the navamsha is so significant, that gives the impression that these 4 quarters of the nakshatra are very significant. It is nowhere in Vedanga Jyotish, it's nowhere there. They do nakshatra division, and they don't even divide it into 4. So that's what I have to say about nakshatra padas. Anaya says, are there any texts that you would recommend most when learning the language of Vedic astrology? Language of Vedic astrology? Do you literally mean Sanskrit? Or do you mean like the basics, like the grammar of the astrology? I'm just going to be like self-promoting and say I recommend my books because I took so much time, I worked on them, and that's exactly the way I would want something to be explained. So I would recommend vicdicara.com. Go to the books, and there's several. You probably want to start with Basic Philosophy of a Beautifully Rational Philosophy of Astrology and Radically Deep Fundamentals. Thank you, Rasaltu. Thank you. Omari, have you ever considered writing novels? See, now, Omari, this is a really interesting thing. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit of personal history. First of all, yeah, I originally, as a youth, I was really into creative writing, and I was writing like fictional stories. Have you ever considered writing novels? Your understanding of charts would help you make some pretty interesting characters. My dad did that. He wrote a novel, and he had me do a chart for the main character. But actually, I'll tell you this little thing that I did. But some mysterious thing happened with it. Anyway, this was back 12 years ago or so. I was writing, I think it would be my first book on astrology. And so I had this long chapter, or maybe several chapters, called Party with the Planets. Oh man, if anybody has that text, because maybe there's somebody who will hear this video whom I emailed it to or something, then I would really like to get it back. If I ever got it back, I would publish it. But the whole concept of it was a novel-ish type of thing, situation where you go to a party and actually meet the different planets, and it was, it was dramatized. And I really, really, really liked it, and I thought it was really good, and I really wanted to publish it, but somehow it completely vanished from my magnetic world where my computer keeps things stored. And then I haven't been able to find it since, so I just gave up on it. But if it ever does come back to me, I will. I'm not going to try to rewrite it, but if it ever does come back, I will get to publishing it. Chiari, how long did it take you to study? Don't worry about how long it took me, because different people go at different rates. Because different people have different history in previous lifetimes. So it doesn't really matter how quickly it takes one person. It just matters what, you just do it at your own pace. Well, let's see what else we have here. If a planet is at 0 degrees and the cusp is at 29, then could it be considered as part of the previous sign's house as the planet? So this is a good question. I mean, this is a highly specific question, but it's a good question. Why do I think it's a good question? Because I think this person is kind of thinking about the way astrology works and has come up with an actual quandary. So the question is, look, if the cusp, which in the whole sign system, cusp is not the edge of the sign, the word cusp means defining point. So in the dynamic systems, they use the word cusp as the border. They take the defining point as the threshold. But in the whole sign system, the defining point is where the ascendant degree falls. So if your ascendant is at 11 degrees of whatever sign, then 11 degrees is the cusp in each house. So what if your ascendant is 29 degrees? Then you have a planet at 0 degrees. So let's say you have a planet at 0 degrees Aries. And your ascendant is at 29 degrees Aries. Then is that planet really in the first house? Or it's a hell of a lot closer to the 12th house cusp. It's 1 degree away from the 12th house cusp. It's 29 degrees away from the first house cusp. So what is it in? Well, there's 2 factors at play. One is that houses have walls, like literally. So my daughter is in the other room. She's only maybe 5 meters from me, but I can't really hear her. I can't see her. It would be difficult to talk to her because there's a wall between the room that I'm in and the room that she's in. My wife is also somewhere that's in the house, probably not that far from me, but through a floor. So the houses in astrology are similar. The borders of signs are similar. They're not inconsequential at all. So however you notice, you can kind of hear things through walls and floors. It's not that it's completely soundproof and it blocks everything. So those are the 2 things to bear in mind. That if I am in Aries and the ascendant is also in Aries, then I am in the first house. It might be that the ascendant is totally on the other side of the house from where I am, but I am in the first house. Yeah, so if the cusp of the houses is really close to me, but it's on the other side of a wall, then yes, I do have some influence on that other cusp. But it's not that I'm in that other house, right? So this is how I would work it out. So for example, if you have Mars in Aries at 0 degrees and the ascendant is 29 degrees of Aries, then Mars has an influence in the 12th house fairly significantly. Not as significantly as if it was 1 degree away from the cusp in the sign, but kind of as significantly as somebody who's got their ear pressed up against the wall or is tapping information on the wall for the person on the other side to hear. Okay. Good night, Heidi. Sleep well. Can I only use D9 to make predictions? You better not, because that means you don't understand what it is. Thank you, Diogenes. I love that. Thank you so much. What else do we got here? Andre, is it alright to use cartography? It's a modern idea. I tested it. I have mixed feelings about it. It doesn't really seem to be entirely theoretically sound to me. So I have mixed theories about cartography. I personally wouldn't advise it, but it doesn't mean that you can't try it out. Kuma says, do you worry about the world falling apart within our lifetime? What is the best way to learn about our past lives using the natal chart? Two different questions. Do I worry about the world falling apart within our lifetime? I don't. Because if it falls apart, then I'm done. But actually, it would kind of be difficult if there's like some kind of in between, like things fall apart, but not entirely, and life just becomes really difficult. But what's the point of worrying about that? The only thing that you can do is your best on your conditions. Depends on what the conditions are. Some people think, man, you should try to figure out if it's going to happen because you should prepare for it. Well, okay. Well, according to Shastra, according to the Vedas, it's kind of just falling apart at a gradual pace over hundreds and thousands of years, or a couple 100,000 years. So it's kind of falling apart gradually. There's some big, just like the way the yen fluctuates against the dollar, there's some big sudden up and downs, but there's just a general trend. So because of my faith in Vedic sages, I don't have that much worry that it's suddenly going to be a disaster. It doesn't mean it couldn't suddenly be a disaster tomorrow, but every day you wake up, you just should wake up and deal with the situation that's presented to you. And think if you think that you can prepare in advance for things, I think you have an idea that maybe you can beat the system somehow. But the system is not meant to be beat. It's meant to be cooperated with. So the other question was the best way to learn about our past lives using the natal chart. I would recommend that you don't limit yourself to the natal chart to learn about your past lives. You know, you should also be open to assessing whether or not you have any past life memories, which will be markedly different. You'll notice them as being markedly different from the way you think and feel in this life, or the way you do things, and often they'll come as dreams. The other thing that I recommend, which now I'm just quoting from Narada Muni in the Bhagavatam, he recommended that, and he also recommended that you just assess your talents, because those are the areas that you were involved with. The natural talents that you have are the areas that you were involved with in your previous human birth. As far as how you see it from the chart, it's difficult to test. And I like to test things. You know, it's difficult to test whether a technique for knowing your past life is accurate or not. And I'm sure you know why. Because you don't really have that much objective information about what it really was. But there's people that say different things, but really it's just the whole chart is telling you what your past life was. Because this is the present. It's showing you what is the present. The present is the result of the past and the creator of the future. Again, this is all in that book, Beautifully Rational Philosophy of Astrology. The present is the product of the past. So if you're looking at the chart of your present birth, you're looking at what the reason why it is what it is because of what was going on in the past life. So for example, actually I've heard a lot of interesting things. They're just interesting things. Like I say, I don't know if they're accurate or not because I can't test them. But like if you have, I don't know why I like this, but if you have the damage to Venus occurs by doing inauspicious acts to, to flowering trees. And it's very easy, really. If you have a good mind for doing astrology, you can just actually figure out past life things easily without having separate techniques for it. So for example, if you have damage to Venus in a religious house, then in a previous life, you were criminal or insulting towards saintly women. Can you see how that makes sense? If you have a damaged Venus in the 9th house, then you did something bad to religious women. to saintly women. If you have a damaged Jupiter in the 5th house, then you were negative towards children. It's just actually quite simple. You don't really need separate techniques for it. That's my advice for that. Chinmoy asks, how do you differentiate between karma yoga and jnana yoga? Isn't celibacy necessary to discipline the mind and focus on heavy? No, I really encourage. It's just like I stress actually getting a good education in astrology. Even more important would be to get a good education in Shastra, which is not as easy as it sounds because there aren't a lot of teachers. But I do have on my page, victorkara.com. Go to books. You can get 4 volumes of the Bhagavatam, and you can get the Bhagavad Gita with my way of doing it, of translating it. So I suggest really carefully studying those at least to get some kind of education. So the 6th chapter in Gita talks all about Jnana Yoga and how Jnana Yoga is done. And the 1st through the 6th, or the 3rd through the 6th, they talk all about Karma Yoga. And celibacy doesn't even literally mean abstinence. It means regulation. And the qualification for doing Jnana Yoga is that the Karma Yoga has already been done. So all these things you learn all these things when you just get a good solid education in it. The thing which is necessary for Arnold Schwarzenegger to develop his muscles is not necessarily the thing which is necessary for Joe Biden to develop his muscles. And do you know why? Because Arnold Schwarzenegger has a different adhikar for exercise than Joe Biden. So similarly, the thing which is developed the necessary to steady the mind is not the same for you as it is for me or the next person. That's why you need guru. It's not that you need to join a cult or you need to have some guy who exploits you and takes all your money. That's not what a guru is. The guru is the person who understands the paths and how the paths work and which one applies to you at this particular moment. Just like you need a doctor to decide what kind of medicine you need if you are sick. There's all kinds of medicine out there, and what's important, the medicine that will work on disease A is not the medicine that should be given to disease B. Similarly, the yoga and the specifics of the sadhana that will be given to person A are not the same as what person B should get. That's why all the stuff of the internet and this mass communication, it's actually useless. It's much, much better to have personalized interaction with people. But that's what we got in this era, in this incarnation, in this lifetime, we have this. So why not use it? But let's not be under the illusion that we are in a better situation than we were in 2,000, 3,000 years ago, when you just had 6 or 8 people that you knew for your whole life and one wise person in the village. A young woman named Hope says, Vic, what resources can you suggest to someone interested in discovering the scientific basis for astrology? I would recommend looking at my videos on science and astrology. They're on my channel page. There's a playlist, Science and Astrology. And also read the book that I wrote, which is called The Beautifully Rational Philosophy of Astrology. I have something from MX. Whoa, MX. Is that... Oh, Mexican dollars, 200. Thank you so much. Why didn't you finish the house sequence series? It was pretty dope. Okay, I understand the questions. Why didn't I finish the house sequences series? I just got bored. And in order to make things, you have to have enthusiasm for them. So I know YouTubers make things that people want to see, but I'm not a YouTuber. I'm an astrologer that does this thing on YouTube. So I have to make what I feel inspired to talk about. I just got off track with that, and I didn't get back on track with it. And there's nothing really you can do about that. But if you're looking at these new videos that I'm doing, like Jupiter in the 10th house and all the zodiac signs, all that stuff with the house lordships, is now coming back into the video content, because it's an integral part of figuring out, let's say, Jupiter in Aries in the first house. It's integral to know that, I guess it's the 3rd and the 12th lord, right? If Aries is the 10th house, Jupiter is the 12th and the 9th lord. So figuring out the 12th and 9th lord in the 10th house is essential to figuring out how Jupiter acts in the 10th house in Aries. So that's going on in all the videos that I'm doing now. So that's been replaced, that's been reinstated in a different incarnation. What is in the courses on your website, which is a deep fundamentals book, lack, to be honest, nothing. But it's just that people need to hear things multiple different ways, through different mediums and different ways. So like just reading something from a book might not sink in or strike you by hearing the same thing spoken by a person or shown by some animation on a screen. Conversely, sometimes when somebody's saying something or trying to animate it, it might not sink in the same way that reading it does. So it doesn't mean that the two of them are useless. Like if you did one, you don't need to do the other. All right, thank you so much, Ariel. What else we have here? Oh, we're done. All right, yeah, we're done. So I should just keep it at my time limit, right? Thank you, everybody. I think we'll be doing this more often. Not as often as before, because we don't want to burn out. But we will be doing it more often. Thanks all.